You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live, where James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly provide owner-operators of commercial trucks with expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking fleet. It's time to mind your trucking business.
And welcome in TNCRadio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. Guys, all sorts of interesting things have been going on in the world of the trucking industry, especially some decisions that have been made or not made, depending on how you look at it, out of the Supreme Court. We've got another here that's sitting out there that, well, it's making life a little interesting for those in the trucking industry. Jamie, let me start off with you. Can you kind of summarize the latest going-ons and what you think the impact might be to those in the industry?
Well, it's starting to look like an all-out war with the state of California on the trucking industry. The Engine Manufacturers Association, they go under the acronym EMA. They filed a lawsuit against CARB, the California Air Resources Board, because they're saying it failed to give them the court-mandated 4-year lead time on changes to engine specifications and what is expected in relation to the new Emissions Act that California is putting forward. So they say that the 2-year lead time that they were given violates federal guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, it just does. I mean, that's one of the things that along with the Supreme Court ruling tied in with the EPA. So they're trying to all tie it in together about how this is working with the state of California.
Yeah, sorry, James. Let's just stop for a minute. I was expecting. I was just kind of chat with Tom. I forgot that I had said I had a question for James.
Oh, yeah.
I still have that question, but can we just take it from the top?
Let's just take it from the top. Okay. Just a second here. Stop, clear. And starting in 3. Give me a second. I just need a moment of silence here so I can find it later. And 3, 2, 1. And welcome in TNCRadio.live, Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly, along with Jamie Irvin and James Rogers. We're here with you each and every week talking about what's important, what's going on, what you need to know in minding your own trucking business. And guys, it seems like there's just all sorts of things going on, all sorts of decisions recently from the Supreme Court, and some would say not decisions from the Supreme Court, that have left the industry with a big question mark. If you could picture the editorial comment right now, would be a truck with a big question mark over it. Where are we going? There's so much different stuff going on here. And I know, Jamie, some of this has really been eating at you. And even though you technically are in Canada, some of these things still highly impact what's going on in Canada. But it, of course, is putting us in a weird position with some of the states here, and it's very confusing. So let's try to unpack some of that tonight. So, Jamie, let's start off with you. What are you seeing out there? What's grabbed your attention?
Well, what happens in the state of California is very concerning, especially related to the trucking industry, because oftentimes it can be the thing that kicks off. What happens in California can then spread nationwide. And I've always told people, they ask me, well, you're Canadian, how does these things in the US affect you? And I say, well, what happens in the US then it pretty much happens in Canada when it comes to trucking standards, because we have the North American Free Trade Agreement, where Canada is the US's largest trading partner. And so, these regulations, they end up having to be standard across the country's borders, because so many Canadians are trucking south and so many Americans are trucking north. So what's going on in California? It feels like an all-out war on the trucking industry. Last week we talked about AB5 and how that adversely impacts owner operators. But something that caught my attention was that the Engine Manufacturers Association, or EMA, they filed a lawsuit against the California Air Resources Board, also known as CARB. And in the lawsuit, what they cited is that that CARB has failed to allow the required lead times outlined in the Federal Clean Air Act, which states, and I quote, that heavy-duty on-highway engine and vehicle manufacturers must be given at least 4 full model years of lead time before new emission standards take effect. And so they're saying, look, this 2-year lead time you've just given us, it doesn't cut it. And for several years now, we've been talking about the way that the EPA and the way that CARB has impacted the way engines are manufactured and really the operating costs of trucking fleets. And we saw that in the initial introduction of diesel emission systems, of course, back in 2007. Then we had additional revisions in 2010 to the technology, where we saw the addition of SCRs. And we've known for a while now that roughly about 2027, there was supposed to be some new standards that were going to further reduce NOx emission, but it looks like CARB has gotten a little impatient. The article I'm looking at cites that California does have unique air quality issues that must be addressed. But to me, where this is headed is, again, very prohibitive for the independently owned fleet or the owner operator. It's just another attack on their ability to do their jobs. And as we know, and James can attest to this, the trucking industry is made up of a lot of small business owners, small to medium-sized businesses, and they're all independently owned. And James, my question to you is how much of what you spend on maintenance and repairs can be put under the category of diesel emission systems?
You asked a hard question, but an easy one at the same time. The easy answer is that it goes under, anything you would classify as after treatment diesel emissions. It really does. If I had to put a percentage on it, I would say well over 90% of, especially the trucks that I run or the contracted companies that I work with that they run. I could tell you from personal experience that the 2015 Freightliner that I was running for the last 5 years, in total, I've probably spent over $40,000 in diesel emissions costs, not to mention replacing the entire one box system at the end of it. So
that's a big ticket item.
That's a very big ticket. That item alone is on average about $13,000 to $15,000, not to mention the labor and everything to put it in. Anytime that the fact of the matter is that anytime that usually there's a problem with these emission trucks, it's always something to do with the after treatment. I could about 99.9% of the time when something goes wrong, I can tag it to an emissions problem, whether it's a doser valve, whether it's a NOx sensor, whether it's something in the SCR box, the SCR system, the one box may be failing. It's always related to something in there. The engines themselves don't present the problems. It's always the diesel emission system. Always.
So let me ask you another question. If you could choose any vehicle manufactured after 2007 and put that vehicle up against, let's say, something manufactured before 2007, let's go to one of those really reliable 3406 CAT engines, right?
Yeah.
Which one is more reliable and more dependent?
Well, I'm a CAT fan. I like CAT. But if you don't mind, I'd rather relate it to a Series 60 Detroit, because I do run one of those.
Okay.
It's pre-emission. I will tell you this right now. That Series 60 pre-emission engine, I have not had one problem out of that truck. Not one problem. I have not put, outside of the initial repairs of when I bought the truck to get it road ready, I have not invested one penny into that truck for repair.
Okay, and to put it into perspective, James, now you're running a fleet of 7 trucks, right?
8 now, yes.
8 now. Congratulations.
Thank you.
In a recent Technology and Maintenance Council study put on by TMC, they found that one of their fleets with 500 units was spending $27,000 a month on diesel emission system and after treatment maintenance and repairs. Now, pre-emission standards, you want to venture a guess how much they were spending?
I would like to say zero because I know what I'm experiencing.
It was statistically not relevant, meaning basically zero. It might have been a few bucks for some exhaust pipe or something that needed to be fixed. It represented a 1,837% increase in cost direct to the fleet.
Yeah, because people don't truly understand what the emissions does to the truck engine. And like I said, I do have a 14-liter Series 60 that's pre-emissions. And like I said, I have not had one problem with that. And I know several guys who run the glider kits and stuff, and they don't have the problems with the engines. And when the rest of the guys who are in my fleet, it is consistently a problem with the diesel emission system. Always a problem with it.
So we're recording this in 2022. These emission standards that really changed the way engines were put together. It changed it added all of the after treatment system components. That came in 2007 and 2010. We've had nearly 15 years to get this stuff figured out. And it is true that we've made some improvements in managing that, but the cost to the actual fleet and owner operator is just huge. Now, let me ask you something. In December 2021, CARB adopted the Heavy Duty Engine and Vehicle Omnibus Regulation. Now, this is a strict package of emission standards, test procedures, and other emission-related requirements applicable to new heavy-duty engines and vehicles sold in California. And this is why there's the lawsuit. They want this to go into effect January 1, 2024. Have you ever seen a group of engineers able to change something as significant as part of the engine system in a short period of time, and that actually work out for the vehicle owner?
Oh, see, you got me. I was getting ready to throw it out there. No, the answer is no. I think the only engine maker I've ever seen try to make a change to the engine like that in that short amount of time that made an attempt at it was was International when they put out the Max Force engine. And of course, we know how that ended.
Disastrous.
Disastrous. So yeah, the answer is no. I mean, the fact is a diesel engine honestly is a very particular and high tolerance piece of engineering. There are some very high tolerance in this engine. They're designed to work under certain compressions, a certain way, certain temperatures, and all this other stuff. And then when they try to add in a component of, an after treatment system, and now you're really, really screwing with that. So yeah, they've been making improvements, but they just haven't worked it out. And honestly, it's put a drag on the engines.
So when we get back from our break, we're going to talk about what you as a vehicle owner can do to reduce your total cost. And we also going to talk specifically about what you should be doing to try to combat the war that California is starting with the trucking industry. We'll be right back.
Join Dr. Chris Kortman for Building Strong Minds Mondays at 7, 6 Central, tncradio.live.
I'm Hope Savara, your host of the Driver Life Podcast, every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern on tncradio.live.
I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on tncradio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on tncradio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Welcome back in tncradio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Irvin and James Rogers. Guys, a bit of a spirited discussion here on the role of the EPA and its demands to have equipment manufacturers make certain changes. Jamie, why don't you pick it up and keep us going?
Well, this is one of the things that is so frustrating with what's happening in California, whether we're talking about labor laws or we're talking about emission standards. California's got some big problems, and they're trying to solve those problems, and we understand that. But, it's this law of unintended consequences. They try to change the labor laws to restrict companies from taking advantage of people by making them contractors and thereby avoiding having to pay them things like health benefits. That's something that was pretty much aimed at companies like Uber and Lyft. And it has this unintended consequence where now owner operators are going to virtually be unable to continue with their existing business model as an independent, self-employed person who has all of this commercial equipment. It's the same with these emission standards. Like, we get that California has some pretty unique emission issues related to, their population density and their climate. And we understand that they need to take action, but the choices that they're making that are primarily aimed at something more automotive has these big implications for commercial vehicles. And that's what we're seeing with this latest lawsuit. So, it just seems like the state of California is constantly being sued. And, as with the labor laws, the Supreme Court refused to hear it. So I guess California won that round. The Truck and Engine Manufacturers Association, EMA, they filed that lawsuit against CARB, citing that they have violated the Clean Air Act, which is a federal act, which gives manufacturers at least 4 years if there's going to be changes to the emission standards. And what CARB's trying to do is ram something through in 2 years. And as James and I were talking about, this has a big impact on anybody operating a vehicle that has an emission system on it. One thing I'm worried about, James, is I think there's going to be a time not that distant future where states like maybe California and Oregon are just going to flat out say, you can't register this vehicle and operate it in our state. Do you worry about that as someone who runs some older equipment? We talked about that pre-emission Detroit 60 and how awesome it is to run that engine over an engine with emission systems. Does that concern you at all?
Does it concern me to the fact of it's going to affect my business? No, because
you're not in California or Oregon either.
Yeah, correct. Because of the way, and that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to relate it to me first personally, but me first personally, no, because I don't operate in Oregon and California. Now, if I was in Oregon and California, yes, I would have a big concern about it, because there are still a lot of trucks that operate there pre-emission. There are a lot of trucks that, are there as glider kits. There are a lot of trucks that are older, whether they're running EGRs and stuff, and the try to shove this stuff down our throat. It really is. It is a direct attack on the industry. It's a direct attack on the independent owner operator, the owner operators, the small fleets and the companies. And it gets frustrating. And what's going to happen is unless we get some support or some fight back to say, hey, this is getting out of control, then what's going to happen is California is going to logistically is going to fall apart. You're already starting to see it. And then with this being continued, it's just going to put more of a hamper on it, because you can see it all day long. And it's mostly in the ports. When I do go to California, that's where I see a lot of these trucks that are either pre-emission or glider kits or whatnot, is they're working out of the ports. We're already struggling in these ports. And then, of course, with the passage of the new labor law, it created another problem. And then we have this, and it's going to create further problem. So it really starts to make you wonder of why is this attack going on? And with that old adage, it's like, I want to follow the money. Who's profiting from these laws? Because it really is starting to become a direct attack on the transportation and logistics industry in this state.
Well, and how much of a financial hit would it be to you if you weren't, is it your 05 Western Star that has the Detroit 60 pre-emission?
Yes, sir.
So if the government just came along and said, sorry, next year you can't register and use that vehicle, and you had to go, so now you can't sell it.
Right.
And you have to go buy another vehicle. I mean, what kind of a financial hit would that be to your business?
Oh man. I mean, right now, if it was put in place today, number one, I would lose the ability to operate that truck and obviously sell it. So it becomes no more than a lawn ornament. Outside of that, trying to buy a new truck right now, you're looking at, over 100-something thousand, depending on what truck you get. Freight, there are Freightliner Cascadias that are running over $100,000 easy.
Even if you can get the truck, right? Because right now production is crazy.
Exactly.
Okay. So the reason I bring that up is because managing trucks with emission systems is something that is a reality for most operators. And I do think that on the one hand, there is a lack of education about the systems. And I think that there is a lot of times on the parts and maintenance side, we hear customers complain about the system not working. And, as an example, they'll come and they'll say, like, this DPF filter you sold me is it's no good. And it plugged up in 2 or 3 weeks, and we just changed it, or we just had it cleaned, and like there's something wrong with what the product or service you supplied me. And the reality is that if a DPF clogs that quickly, there's an upstream issue. Yes. Right. And when we start to dig into the truck, 99% of the time, we're going to find maybe a turbo issue. We're going to find something upstream that is creating that situation. Mm-hmm. Another issue is people not maintaining the systems regularly enough. And I understand, right? They're trying to save money, but in the long run, it costs a lot more. So having that DPF taken out and cleaned is one part of the regular maintenance, but it's also making sure that when that is being done, things like clamps and gaskets are put like new and replaced, not reused. Things like having the whole system inspected when you've got it in the shop, because the last thing you want to do is bring it into the shop and then go out onto the road the next day and have a breakdown and then have to get towed back to the shop. So there's definitely a component there where we could improve the efficiency and of that. But you just can't deny so many people having such terrible performance out of these systems overall. It can't just be lack of regular maintenance on the part of the truck driver. There is inherently issues with these systems, and that's what concerns me about this these new emission standards and trying to force manufacturers to move at breakneck speed. As you brought out, these engines are running at higher pressure than they've ever run before. Yeah. There is more demand on them than ever before. And yes, on the one hand, that makes them more efficient and less of a polluter. But on the other hand, there is a big price to pay with the vehicle owner, because the maintenance and repair costs are just sky high. And it seems like they're growing exponentially almost year over year.
Oh, absolutely. That's the whole thing that we could really dive into. But to kind of sum it up or touch on it is the fact that the biggest thing is these after treatment systems force these engines to run at higher heats. The way that they're designed, with the exhaust gas recirculation and the way it goes is they're actually picking up more soot and trying to recirculate it back through the engine. But the problem is that puts it into the oil and it completely clogs the system upstream. Just like you said, it's always an upstream issue. And then if your filters are clogging, that's a sign that there's an upstream problem. And then that's where you start getting into it, because they are so inefficient and really nobody knows truly how to work on them, because the reality of it is they just start throwing parts at it, throwing sensors. Oh, the computer's saying this sensor's wrong. Well, let's figure this out. And if that sensor still don't fix it, then they start throwing it out. And a personal experience I've had is I had a problem where I had a knock sensor that was saying it was failing. They replaced the knock sensor. As a matter of fact, replaced 3 of them. Had to pay for all 3 sensors, because once they open it, they can't put it back on the shelf. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, that's not fixing it. Let's start tearing it apart. And come to find out, it was the Venturi tube that crosses over the engine that's at the beginning of the system that was clogged up as a result of this. So we could really dive into this, and I could just absolutely just wear people out about it.
Well, you're preaching to the choir in many cases. EMA President Jed Mandel said that we acknowledge that the Clean Air Act gives CARB the authority to establish California-specific emission standards and regulations. However, in doing so, CARB must, and this is the important part, CARB must follow Congress's requirements. This lawsuit is simply to ensure that CARB follows all of the prescribed rules, one of which is intended to maximize the likelihood of the smooth and successful implementation of new emission standards, end quote. This is exactly where I wanted to take the conversation, because what can you as an individual do to impact the trajectory of some of these things. We're going to talk about that in our next segment.
Great leaders challenge their people not to stop at the first right answer. Tighten the Lug Nuts is the book that will help you move past that first right answer to be more effective, more productive, and more successful. This book serves as a blueprint that can be easily applied by leaders, entrepreneurs, truckers, owner-operators, all of us in our everyday lives. This is one of the best leadership books you can read to help you accelerate towards your personal and professional goals. Plus, a portion of the proceeds will be donated to truckerschristmasgroup.org. Visit TightenTheLugNuts.com to order your copy today.
I wanna rock! I wanna rock! I want to rock!
Welcome into another edition of the Leadership Library, hosted by CEO and author Rocky Romanella. Rocky is the author of the book Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership, and has over 40 years of business experience as a prominent member of the UPS Supply Chain Solutions team, as well as the CEO of Unitech Global Services. So sit back, grab your notebook, and take a seat, and get ready for this edition of the Leadership Library.
Welcome to the Leadership Library podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Romanella. We're going to continue our series on core principles. We've talked about the C, clarity. We talked about the O, right? Only accept the person's best. Today, we're going to talk about the R, refocus on the goal. Now, we've all been in those meetings where we start on a topic and the next thing you know, we're off in different tangents, and you almost get to that point where you say, I'm not even sure what we're talking about anymore or what the topic is we started with. So I think that's so important to always refocus on the goal. You want to stick to one topic at a time. You want to bring some closure to it. You want to make sure that you kind of summarize to make sure we're all on the same page. You want to continue. You want to encourage activities that are directed towards that goal. Don't allow people to go too far off on a tangent. Don't allow people to get so far away from the goal that you don't even recognize what we started on or what we started doing. And I also think you need to limit interruptions. Look, there gets a point where everybody wants to talk maybe, or everybody wants to offer an opinion, or everybody has a view. Look, it's not that you're trying to, not allow everyone to participate, but you have to be careful on those interruptions and have to make sure that you don't get so far off the topic that you lost sight of what you originally were trying to accomplish. And then that brings in confusion, which then allows those individuals who really don't want to be held accountable or don't really want to participate to be let off the hook a little bit, because they look at you, I'm not even sure what we discussed or what we ended up agreeing to. So I'm moving on to something I'm working on, not necessarily working on what it is that you want us to work on. So refocusing on the goal, I think, is so important. Because what it does is it keeps everybody going in the right direction, keeps us all focused on what we're trying to accomplish, and there's no confusion, right? We started with clarity. We started with the thought we're going to only accept our best. We're all going to work on this to the best of our abilities. But then we allowed interruptions. We allowed us to get off of task, off a goal, and now we're so far away that people end up, we don't even recognize what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's what ends up happening sometimes, and I think we have to guard against that. And so I think if you can make sure those three things happen, stick to one topic at a time, encourage activities that encourage those activities that are only directed towards your goal, and then limit interruptions and people pontificating or editorializing or going off on their own tangents, because then what ends up happening is that fuels the conversation to go in a completely different direction. I think that's what's so important. So I think it helps with the clarity, and it helps us only accept our best because we're refocused and we're going in the right direction. And it happens all the time, right? We all know, we all see people do that all the time. And the next thing you know is they're off someplace and we got to kind of reel them back in, and we've lost time. We've exercised energy, and we're farther away from our original goal. So the R is you focus on the goal, and so we've got C, clarity. We've got only accept a person's best, the O. We've got today, the R, and refocus on the goal. And tomorrow, or our next episode, we'll talk about the E, in this whole process, and that'll be our core principles as part of our training and development workshop. Until our next conversation, thank you so much for being part of the Leadership Library family. Until we meet again, be safe out there. Talk to you all soon.
Catch Landline Now every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, along with an encore presentation weekdays at noon, right here on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back in, TNC Radio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom, he's Jamie, and he's James. Jamie, got a question for you here. Well, for either one of you. So all the manufacturing that goes on to produce these new filters, the sensors, everything that it takes to make this stuff run, the additional manpower, the downtime, the idling from dealing with and trying to fix. Do we know for a fact that adding all of this equipment on to improve the engine efficient, or the amount of stuff that gets in the air, did we actually save anything? Do we know that for a fact?
Yeah, we do know that for a fact. So 90% of the nitrous oxide emitted by diesel engines has been reduced with the 2007 and 2010 regulations. So we do know that for a fact.
The other side of that, though, is the fact that they are also realizing that the diesel exhaust fluid that is emitted and put out is actually killing vegetation. So that's one of the concerns that they do have. Now, he's right. It does help with the overall emissions output. You could go with an emissions truck and be in a shop and crank it, and you could stand in there and work on it all day long while it's idling. You can't do that with one of these pre-emissions trucks. You just can't. But the problem is it's the diesel exhaust fluid that's coming out, being emitted out of the stack that's causing a problem with the residue on vegetation and whatnot. And then also it's once again, it goes back to, it doesn't really do anything as far as the operation and the maintenance side of the efficiency of the engine.
I mean, yeah, maintenance and repairs, it's exponentially increased the cost for truckers and the fleets that operate those trucks. In addition to that, it moved the needle on emissions as to the impact of the DEF fluid on vegetation. I think that's something that conveniently we don't have a lot of data on.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an accident. The trucks over the years have become more fuel efficient as well, because, for example, even like common rail fuel injector technology, everything was mechanical and low pressure before. Now everything is electronic and high pressure. So we've seen improvements, and like, nobody's saying that we don't need to make improvements on emission. But the issue here is how rapidly, what is the upside, what is the downside, and if we did nothing, what would be the cost versus what is the cost of what we are doing.
And I guess that's part of where my question is, Jamie. It's not just the emission. Okay, so the emissions are an important part of the overall pollution, right?
Absolutely.
But in creating these things, you create pollution. In repairing these things, you're making every time you do something on the planet, whether you're making a chair or a diesel engine, there are things that are going to be coming out of your process of doing it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And this is a good example, Tom, of that is how they measure diesel powered trucks and their carbon footprint, and how they measure electric powered trucks and their carbon footprint. Did you know that they don't measure those two apples to apples? And there's a reason why. Because when you measure from the well, the oil well, to the wheel, meaning from the moment that you get that oil out of the ground all the way through to when that truck rolls off the assembly line, when you measure that on a diesel engine and you measure an electric vehicle, they're only measuring the electric vehicle from the manufacturing of that vehicle till it rolls off the line. They're not measuring it from the power plant. If they did, the numbers would be much, much closer, especially diesel engines that eventually will be on biodiesel as opposed to traditional diesel. And guess who gave us that information? CARB. CARB put out a 10-year study on biodiesel fuel and found that biodiesel was almost as efficient and as low carbon as electric vehicles were. In some cases, it was not, again, statistically relevant, the difference. In fact, in some cases, it could even be considered to be better. And I was shocked when CARB put that study out last year, because of all people, you would think they were the ones that would want to hide that kind of information. But here's the thing. It didn't even make frontline news because it's not in the narrative of where we are right now politically. And this is why I want to bring it back to what can you do? Now, here's a Canadian telling Americans what they need to do, but you got to, the president of the EMA talked about Congress and the rules that Congress has set. You got to talk to your representatives. Every member of the trucking industry needs to talk to Congress about emission standards, about right to repair legislation, about labor laws and how that impacts the trucking industry. If we don't, as a group, lobby for ourselves, we are going to lose our ability on the independent side to provide society with the things they need. And that's a bad idea for us to go down that road.
It is, because so much of the actual industry overall, statistically, when you look at the numbers, so much I think, what is it, 70-80% of the trucks in this industry are the smaller fleet and independent owner operators.
At least 70%. That's correct.
Yeah. And if you lose that ability, the mega carriers can't haul it all. There's no way they can do it. No way at all. So that's going to, that would topple. That would be, I don't even know. I don't even want to think about it.
Well, we can't go there. Research has been done by the American Trucking Association on what would happen if the truck stopped, and the impacts on society are absolutely devastating. And so that's why, as Americans, you need to talk to your representatives, and as Canadians, we need to do the same thing. We need to go to, for you, it's Congress. For us, it's our MPs. We've got to go and talk to our local representatives, because maybe you're not in California, but you don't want this stuff to come to your state, because it, like with you, James, it could destroy your business overnight. Any one of these issues, never mind stacking 2 or 3 of them on top of each other.
Yeah. Oh no, you're absolutely correct. And right now, am I overwhelmingly concerned? No. But am I very aware and tracking this as it moves along? 100%. Because it very well could. And if it did come to the state of Missouri, it would really impact me on the company side of it. It could potentially impact a lot of my contractors. I'd have to think about a career change.
And I've worked with the lobbying group that works with the auto care industry. So I've had one of the vice presidents at the auto care industry come on my show, the Heavy Duty Parts Report, and we've talked about right to repair legislation. And that's the message that they've come back, is that people who are for destroying right to repair legislation have over 200 special interest groups lobbying on behalf of them. That's working in conjunction with manufacturers, right? Yeah. So if you as an independent want to fight that, you've got to make your voice heard at your representatives level, because they need to take that information. And so it's no different with emission standards or labor laws or anything affecting your business. The Mind Your Trucking Business is all about trying to help you understand what's happening and make better decisions. And I'm telling you right now, we need the 70% of independent owner operators and independently owned fleets. We need those people, every one of them, to go talk to their local representatives.
Oh, absolutely.
Invite them to your shop.
Yeah.
Show them the bills. Talk to them about your business model.
I'm glad
get them involved.
Yep. Because what we've done is, the thing about this industry is that you could bet on is sure and true is the fact that there will be, the threat of a trucker strike or a slow roll or something that goes to DC. We just had one. But the thing is they're not listening.
No,
they're not listening that way because it's not the mass. What they will listen to is, just like you said, it's going to take that 70% to get every one of their state representatives on board and get them to do that. Like for mine here in Missouri, I have Josh Hawley and now I'm forgetting about the other one, but I have openly sent them invitations to come ride with me in my truck, to come get in this truck and see what we go through. And then, like you said, I have willingly opened to offer them to come sit in my office and let's look at these numbers and see how it does affect us. Have I gotten a response yet? No, not yet. But does not mean that I'm not going to stop. I don't.
And the more people, James, that do it, the more people like you who do it. See, what we need is, this is something interesting. I just want to, this isn't about encouraging, this isn't some Canadian encouraging Americans to revolt. This is the democratic process. And one thing the Auto Care Association taught me in working with them on Right to Repair is they told me that in DC, they want their constituents to tell them, like that's their job. And they're actually, they want people to come and talk to them about what's really going on day to day. The problem is that not enough people do it. And so it looks like it's a focus group of one, which is of course very dangerous. But if everybody starts to send the same message in state after state after state, we can make this a bipartisan issue. We can make this an issue that is so relevant to the nation's success that it doesn't matter how you are oriented politically, because it affects you. Because guess what? It doesn't matter which end of the spectrum you're on. You need food, you need clothing, you need medicine, you need energy, which means you need the trucking industry.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
All right, with that said, let's take a quick break. We'll be back here in just a couple of minutes on tncradio.live. And welcome back in tncradio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. Guys, interesting discussion in the last segment, so let's follow on with that a little bit. It's quite clear, and Jamie, you've said in the past, I don't remember whether you said it tonight or not, but that California has declared war on trucking. Am I quoting you correctly there?
I believe that. And in all fairness to the people in California that are trying to deal with the issues of California, I don't believe that it's been an overt war on the trucking industry. It's almost like it's the law of unintended consequences, but the results are the same. And when you attack the fundamentals of the trucking industry, whether you meant to or not, you're going to war with something that you need for your very survival. And that is is just so stupid, but it's happening. The thing that I'm concerned about is I'm hearing that some of these ideas and some of these policies are not contained by, just within the state of California. Is that correct?
Well, there's that. And there's at least one governor, the governor of Connecticut, who has made it quite clear that he is very much interested in having a war on trucking. He doesn't want trucks to go through his state.
No, not at all. I mean, he not only has he openly said that he's got his own version of the AB5 bill in hand, waiting to put it in, but just recently he publicly said he don't care if trucks come through, and he made it evidently clear because, number one, the 1st of July, their fuel tax went up by 9 cents. And then he also, starting January 1st, has got the same kind of fuel tax by mile that Oregon has, which is what keeps a lot of people out of Oregon. So yeah, he is definitely going to war against the logistics industry.
So
so let me ask you a question. How does this governor intend to get food to his house?
Well,
or energy or clothing or the medicine he's going to need, because no doubt he's not a young man. Like, this is insane.
It is. And that's where I wanted to go with this this part of the conversation is, as we're out there, doing the driving and everything, where do we go with? I mean, obviously we're not talking to the right people, right?
No.
We need to be talking to the people who are making the decisions in Washington, because the message isn't getting through at this point.
No, it's not. There's a bumper sticker here in Alberta, because we see these same trends in Canada. Our current federal party is completely at war with the trucking industry. They're at war with the farmers. They're at war with the oil and gas and the energy industry. It's gotten right out of control. But there's a bumper sticker. It's very humorous. It says, "My truck doesn't run on pixie dust and unicorn piss."
I love that one.
And it's just it's a commentary on the fact that it's like, okay, we have these issues and we need to change. Fine. But to what? Because what we had pre-industrial age was not better than what we have today.
No.
So you want to change. Okay, fine. To what? Show me a pathway where we don't destroy our economy. We don't degrade the average citizen's level of living experience, and we don't reduce their life expectancy. We can't go back to the dark ages here, people. So you want to change, but to what?
Exactly. Because right now, like take Connecticut, for example, like you asked the question, how does he expect to get this stuff to them? And you said the dark ages. I mean, that's about the only way they're going to get it, horse and buggy, or they're going to have to airlift it or put it on a train, because the way it's going right now, there will be no trucks operating in the state of Connecticut.
But the thing is it's not like putting it on an airplane or put it on a train or whatever. It's not like these alternative transportation options are, first of all, viable.
Correct.
Second of all, it's not like they don't produce the same kinds of negative impacts, sometimes to a greater degree. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sorry, but have you ever seen the numbers on what an airplane burns in fuel versus a diesel truck? It's not even comparable. Air travel is so much more. And the thing that really bothers me is that we don't have a deep enough conversation about the actual best solution, because the actual best solution is to produce cheap, clean energy in as much abundance as possible and raise the most amount of people out of poverty possible. Because when you look at countries that are still burning things like wood, dung, and coal, their contribution to our emissions issues globally are far worse than any of the more advanced places. And so if the actual solution here is to raise those people out of poverty, make them wealthier, give them access to clean energy, which, by the way, North America has an abundance of, and really tackle this from a global perspective. But no, instead, what we want to do is we want to punish all the people who live here. We want to degrade their quality of life. We want to attack the very foundation and infrastructure which has given more people a better life than ever before in human history.
I agree. I'm 100% agree with that. And they need to get off of the industry specific, the one industry that people need. That's just a fact.
Yeah. And when I start to think about this, it just, as everyone can tell, I get a little fired up about it. But the reason why is because I think that there's a real problem in society right now with a lack of gratitude. And there is a real issue with not enough people having, first of all, gratitude, but second of all, historical awareness. Mm-hmm. Did you know that in North America, only 120 years ago, and this is a number that is adjusted for inflation, only 120 years ago, the average North American lived on around $1 to $2 a day.
Man,
those were tough times.
Yeah.
And we as a society here in the West have raised more people out of poverty than ever before in human history. And another thing that most people don't realize is that if you're making north of $30,000 or $40,000 a year, historically, you are in the 1% of richest people who have ever lived in the history of humankind.
Really? That is a stat I did not know.
That is absolutely true. Wow. And this is something that is never talked about. We look at the 1% of billionaires and stuff like that, and we look at the people there and we attack them. But it's like, wait a minute. You're a kid who's going to a Ivy League university and you're attacking the 1%. You are the 1%.
That I agree with.
And
Yes.
this kind of ideology is so dangerous because once you start to go down that road and you lose sight of historical parameters, you lose sight of what we have to be grateful for, you then do dumb things like attack the foundation of everything that puts you in a position to actually be able to do what you do. And that is this positive feedback loop that is creating anything but positive results.
And it creates that vulnerability of actually repeating the cycle.
Right. Because here's the thing. So, okay, you want to attack the West and you want to attack clean energy and you want to attack everything that we've built so far. Okay, fine. But you got to be able to table something better, because everything in our rear view is worse than what we have today. Like you give me one time in history you'd rather live than right now, because I can't think of one.
No, I can't either. And then
I don't want to live in the dark ages.
And that's the thing is, it's like you said, yeah, it makes more and more sense with what you said, is the fact that, yes, they want us to make a change, but nobody's giving us a clear path. They really aren't. They're only they're throwing their own little bits and pieces at it and putting their twist on, what starts in California, and it makes it ever more difficult to say, what is it you really want us to do?
Yeah, you want to electrify everything?
Yeah.
Okay, state of California, let's electrify everything. You guys have brownouts in the summer because of your AC units.
Right.
How are you going to handle the grid with half of your vehicles by 2035 being electric and 100% of your vehicles by 2045? How the heck are you going to produce enough electricity when you've got record droughts and you've got brownouts under current conditions in the summertime where there isn't enough electricity to power people's homes?
Correct. And then you got other states that are wanting to follow in their footsteps that are all the way on, over 4,000 miles away on the other side of the country. So therefore it puts a further burden on the rest of the country because we don't have the infrastructure to support it.
And I want to be very clear. I am not saying that we don't have issues in the West. I am not saying that we couldn't do better. And I am not saying that we don't need to solve climate issues, emission issues, that we don't need to become more efficient. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying is that what I see a lot of attacking and not a lot of innovating and moving towards sustainable solutions. Because even, and some people would argue, well, isn't the electrification of the industry an innovation? It is, but first of all, is it viable for everybody? No. And do we even have the ability to execute it? And the answer, by and large, looks like no. Because of the simple fact that we don't have the capacity right now to actually handle that level of electrification. So it's not a complete solution. Where do we go from here? That's why you need to talk to your representatives. That's why as a group, we are one of the largest groups that if we mobilized and we made our voices heard, they would not be able to ignore us. And I'm not advocating anything illegal. I'm talking about following the democratic legal process of talking to your representatives and making our voice heard as an industry. That is the solution, because we don't need more division and we don't need any kind of illegal activity. That's not going to help us in any way, shape, or form. We are only advocating legal, democratic processes, which I believe still could help us change the course of history and make the trucking industry sustainable and allow us as a group to continue to thrive so that we can provide for everybody else.
I 100% concur with that.
Great discussion, guys. Hey, we got to wrap it up. Thank you all very much for listening in on this week's edition of Mind Your Trucking Business. We'll be back next week. Stay tuned next for the maestro, Ron Samuels, and Reverse Gear right here on tncradio.live.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.